Marianne North was a Victorian painter who traveled extensively from 1871 until her death in 1890 with the aim actually of documenting the world's tropical plants and flowers. Her extraordinary collection of her work is housed at the Marianne North Gallery in Kew Gardens, as I mentioned earlier. For the marathon here, Silke has actually asked North's great niece to read excerpts from her autobiography, Recollections of a Happy Life, being the autobiography of Marianne North. Melissa North's career began in interior design, and with her architect husband, she designed spaces such as the Groucho Club and also 192 in Notting Hill. Now that she has retired from interior design, gardening has become her main occupation and passion. And there is also a very nice link to David Hockney, because she actually lives in the apartment of David Hockney. A very, very warm welcome to Silke Otto-Knapp and Melissa North.
Recollections of a Happy Life, being the autobiography of Marianne North, 1894. 1871, Jamaica. I had long had the dream of going to some tropical country to paint its peculiar vegetation on the spot in natural, abundant luxuriance. So when my friend, Mrs. S., asked me to come and spend the summer with her in the United States, I thought this might easily be made into a first step for carrying out my plan. As average people in England have but a very confused idea of the difference between North and South America, I asked Charles Kingsley and others to give me letters to Brazil and the West Indies, his book, at last, having added fuel to the burning of my rage for seeing the tropics. 1871. On the 12th of July, I joined my old friend Mrs. S. at Liverpool. The next day, we packed ourselves into a comfortable cabin on board the Cunard steamer Malta and moved away westward. In the West Indies at last, Christmas Eve. We passed Watling Island and Rum Cay, and after steaming through the crooked island passage, we had a most exquisite sunset. The gold melting into pure blue so suddenly and yet so softly that one could hardly say where the beginning or ending of either colour was. What a contrast in 1 week. All the blankets were taken out of the cabin, and one sheet was almost unendurable, with both doors and windows open. The next day, we were within sight of Cuba, and the sunset had all the soft colours of a wood pigeon's breast. I gave up the greater part of my dinner to enjoy it. The clouds closed in over it, till at last there was but one opening, like a golden eye with red eyelashes. All the rest different shades of neutral tint, the land under it very green, while the sea looked like ink. The approach to Port Royal, with its long spit of sand and mangrove swamp, and then into the calm bay of Kingston beyond, was intensely exciting. Every tree was of a new form to me, the grand mountains rising gradually up to 7,000 or 8,000 feet beyond, all creased and crumpled with ins and outs, like brown paper which has been much used. I landed entirely alone and friendless, but at once fell into kind, helpful hands. A young Cuban engineer appeared from the moon or elsewhere, hunted up my luggage, paid my carriage and porters, for I had only American money, and saw me safe to the inn. From my veranda or sitting room, I could see up and down the steep valley covered with trees and woods. Higher up were meadows, and Newcastle 4,000 feet above me, my own height being under 1,000 above sea. The richest foliage closed quite up to the little terrace on which the house stood. Bananas, rose apples, with their white tassel flowers and pretty pink young shoots and leaves, the gigantic breadfruit, Eugenia jambos, native of East Indies. Fruit the size of a hen's egg, rose-scented with the flavor of an apricot fruit. Trumpet trees with great white-lined leaves. Star apples with brown and gold plush lining to their shiny leaves. The mahogany trees with their pretty terminal cones. Mangoes, custard apples, and endless others, beside a few dates and coconuts. A tangle of all sorts of gay things underneath golden-flowered alamandas, begonias, and ipomoeas over everything. heliotropes, lemon verbenas, and geraniums from the long-neglected garden running like weeds. All over a giant cotton tree, quite 200 feet high, was within sight, standing up like a ghost in its winter nakedness against the forest of evergreen trees, only colored by the quantities of orchids, wild pines, and other parasites which had lodged themselves in its soft bark and branches. I was in a state of ecstasy and hardly knew what to paint first. I painted all day, going out at daylight and not returning until noon, after which I worked at flowers in the house, as we had heavy rain most afternoons at that season. Before sunset, it cleared again, and I used to walk up the hill and explore some new path, returning home in the dark. Such scenery, high trees draped with bougainvillea to the very tops, bushes of the same nearer the ground, reminding one of the great rhododendrons in our own shrubberies in May at home, and of much the same color, though occasionally paler and pinker. There were orange-flowered cassia trees, whose leaves fold together at night like a sensitive plant, and scarlet erythrinus, looking like gems among the masses of rich green. Exquisite peeps of the river, winding below its woody banks or rushing among great stones and rocks, came upon us, and were gone again with tantalizing rapidity. My friends only laughed when I grumbled at the mules going so fast. Now and then a peaked mountaintop pierced its way through the clouds for a moment and was lost again. Then came a grey, overhanging cliff sprinkled with bracket-like wild pines, spiked with greenish flowers. The near banks were hidden by masses of large-leaved ferns and begonias and arums of all sorts, whose young, fresh leaves and fronds were often tinted with crimson and copper color. Did I not paint and wonder at everything? Every rock bore a botanical collection fit to furnish any hothouse in England. Then there was a real Italian vine pergola leading down through the banana trees to the spring, with picturesque figures continually fetching water from it, and troops of mules, goats, cows, and sheep always moving about, for the grass had failed in most parts of the mountain this year, but was unusually abundant here. I found it hard to leave the next day and lingered over my work till nearly noon, when a gentleman came down the hill leading his horse and spoke to me about the view I was taking, then went on and spoke to my guide, arranging with him that as the inn of the place where we were to stop that night was bad, he should take me to his house, writing at the same time a few lines to his wife to take with us and explain who we were. Who were we, and who was he? We were both ignorant on these subjects, but accepted his kind offer of hospitality in the frank spirit with which it was given, and which one only meets in remote places, far from the cautious rules of civilization, which believe everyone, till properly introduced, to be a rogue. We descended the glorious road to Barrera, another spot for an artist to settle in, rested a few hours of the extreme heat of the day, and I worked at the view from a shady veranda. A mad river made its noisy way through great purple and grey boulders of granite from the strange group of mountains beyond, which here seemed to open themselves out like the walls of an amphitheatre, the sharp points piercing the clouds which formed its roof, and the whole in a state of quivering blue heat, most difficult to represent on paper, as its intense glare of the almost perpendicular sun's rays puzzled one. Was it all shade or all light? Flies and tiny wasps with a taste for chemistry were anxious to ascertain what my colors were made of, and carried various fancy tints into my wet sky, producing effects that were startlingly not artistic. The air was heavy, and there was every appearance of a coming storm, but none came. 1877, Ceylon. While I was at Cagliutara, I saw the first live snake I had seen in Ceylon. I left my sketching chair under the trees when I went in to breakfast one morning, and on my return saw a beautiful bright green thing on the back of it, waving in the wind. My spectacles not being on, I thought someone had put down some new grass or plant for me, and put out my hand to take it, when it darted off and was lost. I did not remain. It was a ribbon snake from the branches of the trees, said to be poisonous. Since that day, I've always worn spectacles and have seen no more live snakes. India, 1877 to 79. Starvation, floods, and fever were all around. The railway was washed away in 9 places, and I could not have left it even if I had wished. The gardens were all flooded, the great river rising, tanks breaking on all sides. The pandanus pines alone seemed to enjoy it, being buried in water up to the tops of their odd stilted roots. Everyone was taking opium, so I followed the fashion, prevention being better than cure. Mount Everest, 1878. While hard at work at that fairy dell, I felt it was raining, and before I could get over the 50 yards of steep descent to the bungalow with my things, I was soaked through and through, and came back through a running stream of water to find the house occupied by a large picnic party, a regular ball supper, cooks, coolies, and other litter all over the passage floor, and half a dozen ladies all drying their things and themselves in my room, using my towel and soap, almost too much company to be pleasant. I escaped as soon as I could to my poor soaked painting. "You only sketch it on the spot and paint it indoors," one beauty said, pointing to the poor thing, which was so covered with raindrops that it looked as if it had the smallpox. "Yes," I said, "that's what I do. Then I take it out to be rained on, which makes the colors run faster, and that's the way I paint, as you say, so quickly." Those unthinking croquet badminton young ladies always aggravated me, and I could hardly be civil to them. I had not met a single person at Darjeeling who had seen the great mountain at sunrise, and few of them had seen it at all that year. Kinchinjunga did not keep fashionable hours. There seemed to be a superabundance of the foxglove and snapdragon kind of flower. One balsam was of a creamy yellow with a deep claret-colored throat inside and out, and there were lovely turquoise berries on another plant, shaded from blue to green, as the real turquoise is. I found, higher up, a beautiful blue creeper, like a gentian Crawfordia speciosa, with its bud set between 2 leaves. The bells were 2 inches long, shaded into white at the neck, like the common gentians, and of the same waxy material. Another new idea to me was the poppy, Meconopsis felici, the flower as large as our field poppy, but of the most lovely pale blue with a gold center, growing on branches from a central stem of brown velvet, a yard or more high. As they faded, all the leaves and stalks turned from green to golden brown. And so sorry. Okay, I lost it.
You want to go on to Darwin now?
So sorry.
This one here. 11, and then you're back on. Yeah? You can start there. London, 1880.
Okay. London, 1880. One day I was asked by Mrs. Litchfield to come and meet her father, Charles Darwin, who wanted to see me, but could not climb my stairs. He was, in my eyes, the greatest man living, the most truthful, as well as the most unselfish and modest, always trying to give others, rather than himself, the credit of his own great thoughts and work. He seemed to have the power of bringing out other people's best points by mere contact with his own superiority. South Africa, 1882 to 83. My hut was watertight and very comfortable, except for the abundant mosquitoes, who bit by day instead of by night there. And the rats woke one up at night, often close to one's head. One night there was a terrible noise. Something hard was banging about, knocking the metal bath and wooden boxes all around. I saw something long in the moonlight moving over the floor. Flying to the door, I set it wide open. All was still outside. I sprang on my bed, lit my candle, and poked at the thing with a long spear, hoping it would go out. It rushed under my bed. I saw it was a rat, only a rat, jumping frantically, which quietened my worst fears. So I put out my light again and slept. In the morning, I found a horrid trap had been set, unknown to me. The poor thing's leg had been broken by it, and he had escaped on 3. Some days after, there was a fearful smell. We could find the dead body nowhere, so I had to go into the sitting room hut till the ants had cleared it away. Seychelles, 1883. To see and paint, that was the great object of my visit. So the next morning after my arrival, Mr. H. took me round the east side of Praslin in his boat. We passed close along the shore, among beautiful boulders of salmon-colored granite, grooved and split into fantastic shapes by heat or ice. Many of the little islands had waving corsairians on their tops, while bright green, large-leaved tatamaca bordered the sands of Praslin, varied by patches of coconut and breadfruit. Above were the deep purple-red, stony-topped hills, with forests between, the famous coco de mer palms shining like golden stars among them. The waves were so high as we reached the southeast angle of Praslin that we had a few anxious moments in our little boat and decided that it was not safe to go the usual way over the breakers at low tide. We must go out to sea and round some of the other islands. So out we went, up and down through a great Pacific swell. At last, we put up a sail and ran into the valley of the Coco de Mer, a valley as big as old Hastings, quite filled with the huge straight stems and golden shiny stars of the giant palm. It seemed almost too good to believe that I had really reached it. There was a thick undergrowth, and we had not started till late, so I could only make one hasty sketch of a tree in full fruit. 25 full-sized nuts, and the quantities of imperfect ones, like gigantic mahogany acorns. The outer shell was green and heart-shaped. Only the inner shell was double and full of white jelly, enough to fill the largest soup tureen. The male trees grow taller than the fruit-bearing one, sometimes reaching 100 feet. Its inflorescence is often a yard long. The huge fan leaves of both trees are stiff and shiny and of a very golden green, different from all other palms, except the coconut in color. I saw many wild palms in the underwood, with lilac stems armed with circles of orange thorns, having edges of the same color to their young leaves. One was cut down, and the young stem chopped in 4 bits to carry away on a man's head, the heart making a good salad when sliced like cucumber. We had sent the boat round and walked up the valley, into which were perhaps 1,000 of the giant palms. But we could not stop, and I never was able to get there again. About the middle of August 1884, I started on my last journey to Chile. It was not the thing for a woman to walk alone in the streets, unless she was wrapped up in a manta, or black cashmere shawl, which is arranged like a nun's headdress, so as to cover forehead and mouth. I used to go to market, hidden in my manta, with the cook sometimes, to get flowers and other curiosities to paint. My great object now was to find the puya, so I got a guide and a horse and started up the mountain. We tied up the horses when it became too steep and proceeded on foot right into the clouds. They were so thick that at one time I could not see a yard before me. But I would not give up and was rewarded at last by the mists clearing, and behold, just over my head, a great group of the noble flowers, standing out like ghosts at first, then gradually coming out with their full beauty of color and form in every stage of growth. While beyond them glittered a snow peak far away, and I reached a new world of wonders, with blue sky overhead and a mass of clouds like sheets of cotton wool below me, hiding the valley I had left. Some of the groups had 25 flower stalks rising from the mass of curly, silvery leaves. About 60 branchlets were arranged spirally around the central stem, each a foot long, and covered with buds wrapped in flesh-colored bracts. These open in successive circles, beginning at the base. The 3 flower petals are at first of the purest turquoise blue. Then they become darker, a mixture of arsenic green and Prussian blue. The third day, a grey-green, after which they curl themselves up into 3 carmine shavings, and a fresh circle of flowers take their place outside, so that the longer the plant has been in bloom, the larger its head becomes. And as the ends of the spikes or branchlets bloom the last, it gradually loses its perfection of form and looks ragged and disreputable. Its orange stamens shine out like gold upon the green of its petals. Thank you.